Number 10. Giuseppe Joe the Boss Masseria was an early mafia don in the United States. He was the boss of what is now called the Genovese crime family, one of the New York Mafia's 5 families from 1922 to 1931. On April 15, 1931, Joe Masseria was assassinated at one of his favorite restaurants, Nuova Villa Tamaro, in Coney Island. Legend has it, after showing up in a steel-armored sedan, Masseria, 45, was joined by Charles Lucky Luciano, one of his top men, for a session of cards, drinks, and old-school dining. While they played cards, Luciano excused himself to the bathroom. When Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, Vito Genovese, Albert Anastasia, and Joe Adonis rushed in and shot Masseria to death, his 4 bodyguards having mysteriously disappeared. When it was over, Joe the Boss was dead with an ace of spades in his hand. From that day forward, the ace of spades was known as the death card. However, it is rumored that the photographer who took the photo decided to stage the crime scene and take the ace of spades card that Masseria was playing with before his murder and put it in his hands. Number 9. In this incredibly unique photo from the Vietnam War from 1972, you can see female activists making their way through the Nam Can forest, barefoot and bouncing on a narrow trunk. The gathering was highly secret, thus they masked their identities. The idea behind the mask was that if they got captured or interrogated, they wouldn't have been able to supply any information or give anyone up. The photographer later explained that from these Mekong Delta mangroves, it was extremely difficult to deliver photos to the north because sometimes the photos were lost or confiscated on the way. Number 8. In this colorized photo from 1920, we see a rare shot of a Mexican fugitive who's trying to flee to Mexico with the help from his friends, while United States Border Patrol officers are trying to drag his ass back into U.S. soil. Number 7. The Battle of the Bulge was a major battle in Europe during World War II. It was Germany's final attempt to drive the Allies off of mainland Europe. Most of the troops involved on the Allied side were American troops. It is considered one of the greatest battles ever fought by the United States military. Early in the morning of December 16, 1944, Germany launched a major attack. The battle lasted for around 1 month as American forces fought back and kept Germany's army from overrunning Europe. The Battle of the Bulge took place in the Ardennes forest of Belgium. While Germany attacked, they used over 200,000 troops and nearly 1,000 tanks to break through the U.S. lines. It was winter and the weather was snowy and cold. The Americans were not ready for the attack. The Germans broke through the line and killed thousands of American troops. They also had English-speaking German spies drop in behind the Allied lines. These Germans were dressed in American uniforms and told lies to try and confuse the Americans so they wouldn't know what was going on. Despite the quick advance and the overwhelming forces of the Germans, many American soldiers held their ground. Their courage and fierce fighting won the battle and sealed the fate of Hitler and the Nazis in World War II. In this photo taken at the crossroads at Hansfield, west of Losheimergraben, a day after the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge, depicts German soldiers strip boots and other equipment from the bodies of 3 dead U.S. soldiers. The American soldiers probably got ambushed by German machine guns when they were attempting a routine street crossing at the wrong time. In 1983, a police sting operation arrested 3 exotic dancers for allegedly breaking the Pinellas County anti-nudity ordinance, which pretty much prohibited topless dancers and strippers from doing their thing. The law also allowed Pinellas County, located in Florida, to regulate anti-nudity in establishments where alcohol was served. Undercover cops claimed the dancers exposed their vaginas to them. The judge presiding over the trial, David A. Demers, allowed a dancer to bend over to show the judge that her outfit did not indecently expose her because her bikini briefs were too large. The judge agreed and he dismissed the charges. Number 5. These photographs show the barbaric treatment of Commonwealth soldiers after they were captured by the Japanese in the Second World War. In some of the images, British Indian Army soldiers from the Sikh regiment can be seen sitting blindfolded with targets on their hearts as troops take aim. After being murdered by the Japanese soldiers, the British troops were then impaled with a bayonet to ensure they had died during the degrading target practice session. The pictures were found among Japanese records when Allied troops entered Singapore in 1945 and returned it to the British rule. Tens of thousands of British servicemen died from starvation, overwork, torture, and disease in Japan's prisoner of war camps during the Second World War. These pictures reveal the full scale of the brutality suffered upon the helpless prisoners. In the first image of the set, the Sikh prisoners of the British Indian Army are seen seated blindfolded with target marks on their hearts and stakes placed in the ground in front of them bearing the butt numbers of each target. They sit with dignity awaiting their end. All of them sit in traditional cross-legged position, reciting their final prayers. It is clear in these photographs that this is a target practice, not a straightforward military execution by a firing squad. A firing squad usually has 6 or more shooters per condemned to guarantee a near-instant death. But in this case, the Japanese shooters are carefully assigned 1 prisoner each, and each victim has a demeaning target mark on his heart. Number 4. This photo taken in the 1980s shows a woman smiling for the camera, along with 2 kids wearing brown paper bags on their heads. The kids probably played around with the bags, which had 2 holes for each eyes to see, a nose and a mouth that formed a very creepy smile. Number 3. This photograph, taken by Edward S. Curtis in 1910, shows a Native American smoke curing a human corpse. The Kwakwaka'wakw people of the Pacific Northwest United States participate in a ritual in which their dead are smoke-cured in trees and several at a time and eaten. Among the Kwakwaka'wakw of the Pacific Northwest, the Hamatsa Initiate was a society of tribal elite. Young men who hoped to become Hamatsa went through a lengthy period of isolation. Shortly before the end of his exile, each initiate was brought a mummy that had been soaked in salt water, cleaned and split open. The initiate was expected to smoke-cure the bound corpse for the final ritual. During the ritual, the aspirant and the senior members of the Brotherhood devoured portions of the corpse. Number 2. During the Victorian era of the 1800s, Napoleon's conquest of Egypt threw open the gates of Egypt's history for the Europeans. At that time, mummies were not accorded the respect that they deserved from the European elites, and in fact, mummies could be purchased from street vendors to be used as the main event for parties and social gatherings that took place in the 18th century. The elites of the era would often hold mummy unwrapping parties, in which a mummy would be unwrapped in front of a boisterous audience, cheering and applauding at the same time. During that period of time, the well-preserved remains of ancient Egyptians were routinely ground into powder and consumed as a medicinal remedy. Number 1. Technology has certainly come a long way over the past 60 years. Some people don't even realize this, but there were actually computers and hard drives that existed in the mid-1950s. Of course, they were much bigger than the computers and hard drives we use today. In fact, the only people who had this technology in the 1950s were companies and businesses. To give you an idea of how big the hard drives were in 1956, a 5-megabit hard drive that was manufactured by IBM could only be transported on a truck or airplane because it weighed almost a ton. September of 1956 was a landmark date because it was when IBM released their new 305 RAMAC supercomputer. The RAMAC stood for Random Access Method of Accounting and Control. The hard drive inside the computer contained 50 different 24-inch hard disks that were stacked on top of each other and covered about 16 square feet just by themselves. What's even more amazing was that it cost companies $35,000 per year to operate this machine back then, and it could only store 5 megabytes of information. Compare that to today's computers, which have 1 terabyte hard drives and also weigh a few pounds. There is a huge difference there.